Excellent. Great. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. We've got a pretty full room. Good morning and a warm welcome once again. My name is Nicola Dixon. I'm an associate director at General Mills Foundation. We're based out of Minneapolis, but a global food company, and really an honor and delight to be here among so many kindred spirits. The session title is called New Models in Food Rescue, and we're going to get into that in a moment when we hear from the panelists. We'll hear much more about that, but a terrific session, an opportunity to hear from a panel of leaders who represent a really wide range of approaches and innovation around ensuring that our food is well loved by being well used. And that's really what today is all about. It's well beyond, it's not just technology, but just innovating around different forms of partnerships, different models of working across sectors, innovation that can take a lot of forms, including and beyond technology, for sure. And in terms of, sort of the why new models thesis for the session, just as we talk about the sustainability imperative, the whole kind of double axes of how do we feed a growing global food population amidst increasingly scarce natural resources. So just as we have that sustainability imperative for the planet, we also believe that there is therefore an innovation imperative, and we have to act and think differently, and in order to do so, we need to connect and create solutions differently. The other thing I'd add is that we don't believe it's about finding the one best solution. We really have to have, a proliferation of innovations and solutions that can be deployed at multiple levels, from hyper-local to more regional and scaled and so forth. And lastly but not least, what we'd love for you to do is to really actively listen to each of the panelists today, who will momentarily introduce themselves. And we've got some Post-it notes, maybe some cards on most of the tables. If not, you can borrow some from your neighboring table. We'd love for you to listen to each speaker, and as each of them is making their remarks, try to find one aspect of their brief remarks, because they're only going to each speak for about 5 to 7 minutes each. That's something that kind of hooked you, whether it's a key kind of curiosity, an insight that you hadn't thought of before, a way that you might be able to connect to their organizations or help advance their work, or a question. And what we'll encourage you to do is, if you feel so inclined, we absolutely want you to feel free to ask one of those questions when we flip to Q&A at the turn. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, or if we run out of time, we'd love for you to grab those notes, and we want to collect those for each of the organizations, so we'll stick them on the boards here, and that will help them have some feedback and stimulation as they go back to their organizations and try to infuse all this great thinking and wisdom in this room. So with that, we've asked each of the panelists today, and by the way, we have Lauren from Lovin Spoonfuls, Doug from Daily Table, Kait from Philabundance, we've got Maen from Replate, Megan from FoodMaven, and Liz here from Feeding America, and they'll give further introductions. But we'd love for you to listen for what problem or aspect of the problem are they and their organizations seeking to solve, and how? How are they doing that? What are some of the lessons learned you're hearing in their remarks within their organizations? And anything about ongoing challenges or wish list items that you hear. So please use the notes as you see fit, and let's give them a warm welcome, and we will go from there with questions.
I'll jump in and start anyways. We don't need a slide, right? So my name is Liz Baldridge. I am with Feeding America. I'm our Director of Sustainability and Food Waste Initiatives, and I'm so excited to be here. I thought this morning was great. Started out with a lot of energy, and this is a fabulous panel. We're all doing different types of work, and the more we learn about each other's work, we can really help enable it and scale it across the nation. So who is Feeding America? Feeding America is 200 food banks, which includes 60,000 partner agencies that we work together for our vision of a hunger-free America. We service every county in the US, and we're really working towards eliminating that horrible number we hear of 41 million Americans who are food insecure. And when we align that with the number that we hear about the 40%, the 1/3, however, it's a large number of food that's really going to waste. It's an issue, and we're out there having conversations to see how we can intersect those two and how we can really get more food into the charitable food system. The one thing I do want to remind us too is, while food rescue is imperative, it's not something that's necessarily going to end hunger. It's an important piece to a complicated issue, but it's an important piece that we really need to talk about and really need to drive some attention towards. So one of the questions we were asked is one of our biggest accomplishments. We look at and talk a lot about the amount of people we reach, which is 46 million Americans. But really, we don't talk as much about how we're able to do that. We're able to do that because we're rescuing 3.5 billion pounds of food. And when I say we, I mean the entire Feeding America network. Feeding America is really unique in that it's a national organization, but it's really a regional organization, a state organization, and a local organization. That's what really kind of sets us apart. And when we think about the innovation that's happening, a lot of it is actually happening from the ground up. So an example of this is our retail donation program. That's something which I think a lot of us are familiar with, picking up at retail stores where some waste is occurring. So that's something that's kind of managed at the national level, but it's really owned at a food bank level, and then it's executed a lot of time at an agency level, agencies being things such as food pantries. And what that's really done has been able to move food quickly, efficiently, and safely. The best part about that is agencies typically are smaller. They've got restricted resources, but since we've been able to push some of the food and enable some of these agencies, it's really strengthened them as well. And in strengthening them, we've been able to service more of the retailers. And then in addition, we're now looking at servicing more of our consumer-facing businesses. So things such as refrigeration, staff, capacity building has really allowed us to scale this program to a level I don't think at one time we thought we'd get to. So we're moving about 1.75 billion pounds through the retail donation program. So, and as these agencies are getting stronger, and it's making more sense. There's people in that community who are hungry. Can we keep the food there and make sure it's fed to those in need? It's interesting because when we think about food banking, we always say it's very much evolved. I think sometimes people still think it's a brick and mortar that shelf-stable food is in, but really it's evolved into a community partner that is facilitating food rescue on every single level. So when we're talking about challenges, one of the things that we think about is we think about farm and consumer-facing businesses. So there's lots of innovative things that are going on both sides of it. Karen talked earlier about our produce co-ops and trying to get more nutritious more nutritious product out of the farms. It's a difficult thing to do, and one of the areas that we really see for collaboration is learning more about where is that food really wasted? How are we able to move this food? Transportation is expensive. How can we learn more about fleets? How can we leverage what's already out there to get this food out of the fields and into the homes? So that's kind of how we're thinking from a field aspect. From the consumer-facing business aspect, I want to share a little bit more about Meal Connect as well. That's an online platform that's really enabled some of that retail donation program that I was talking about. It's enabled communication from the donor to the agency. It's done things such as we've been able to utilize pilots with DoorDash, and that's kind of a last mile solution that this app and this online technology is really enabling. Second, which is another totally different aspect of the supply chain this technology is helping, is it's capturing refused loads from manufacturers, something that was lost in the supply chain. That was a food loss that we weren't really even anticipating this technology could do. The third part we're excited about is we really want technology to be able to reach the end user. So we want to make sure the food that we're saving, that we're rescuing and sourcing and serving is really what is needed at the client level. So to be able to understand what that needed is really important. And probably a good thought is to have those people that we're serving and rescuing food for really at the table to be able to be part of that conversation, the food rescue and the food waste conversation. So those are some clear priorities for us and clear areas of opportunity. And there's just so much eagerness in this space. So I'm excited that we're here from a collaborative sense. I'm excited that we're learning from each other. I'm also excited that one of the Feeding America food banks who's doing such great work is going to talk about some of their innovations, and excited for the Q&A after. So thank you so much.
I'll move on down the line.
And I just want to jump in here. We do have IT services on hand, so hopefully something is, we will be able to show PowerPoints. I will just pull them up, so then.
The speaker.
Amazing! I just unplugged it and plugged it back in.
There you go. 99% of the time.
I know. Okay. Awesome.
It's a range.
Okay. Here we go.
2-minute warning.
I was just curious.
Sorry, Pete.
Yeah, I'd
He's
be
on
so
his
sad
way.
if you all missed out on all of my lovely pictures.
They are great pictures. So here you go, and someone give a holler.
So yes, this was set up perfectly well. Liz from Feeding America. I am Kait Bowdler from Philabundance. We are a food bank. Can you hear me? Yeah, there we go. So we are one of the member food banks of the Feeding America network. We're based out of Philadelphia area, and we have a service territory of 9 counties, so 5 in Pennsylvania, 4 in New Jersey. And of that, we work with 360 agencies in our network to serve 90,000 people every week. So to tell you a little bit more about how that works for us and what that looks like, because we're not just a traditional food bank, we're not just doing cans, and we're not just doing food drives. This is all of our different source streams that we work with. So last year we acquired 31 million pounds of food. Of that, 28 million pounds, or 80%, is food that otherwise would have gone to waste. So we count everything beyond food drives, government food, and what's purchased, even though technically we know a lot of our purchases are purchasing of seconds and other items that actually would have gone to waste as well. So conservative estimate, 80% is food that otherwise would have gone to waste. But we know we can do more with that, and we need to do more with that. So one example of that is we do work with the Port of Philadelphia, or the International Port of Philadelphia, and last year we acquired 11 million pounds from them in the course of 4 months. Sounds great. Problem is, it was 2 types of food. It was melons and grapes, and that was it. So what do you do with that many melons and grapes? Well, even if you try really hard, you can only eat so many melons and grapes. So we ended up sharing that out through the Feeding America network across the country. But there was still so much that went to waste, and we want to do more with that. But it's going to take us a really long time to get to that scalable solution. So what I would say perhaps our biggest strength and our biggest challenge is that we're part of this established network. We've been doing this for 30 years, and it kind of starts to feel like this is how it's done. This is what we do, and this is what we're going to continue doing. But if we're not careful, we're going to become the dinosaurs in this field, and we're going to slowly become the Kodak, and we're going to become the taxi in an age of Uber. So we need to figure out, what do we do differently, and how do we start investing in those areas of impact? Because, as I mentioned, we still have a lot more scale than most of these other organizations that are out there, but we need to figure out, how do we be flexible and change what we're doing? So I just want to highlight 3 different areas that we've identified as areas for impact. One is urban gleaning. So you all know what gleaning is. Urban gleaning is our version of going to the Philadelphia wholesale produce market. We've partnered with them for years, but now we're actually going there and we're sorting produce at their location. So this is stuff that at the end of the week they would have thrown out. They've estimated about 6 million pounds of food just from that one location gets thrown out every year. We think we can take about 1 million out. So we're now going down. We have volunteers that sort through all that produce, separate out the 6 pairs that are bad, and keep all the rest that are good, and able to take that back. So that's that would be about, we're taking 20,000 pounds of food every week. And we're looking at them as purchasing partners. So additionally, we're able to be there, and now we can purchase, so they're donating more. Another area for us is small-scale food recovery, and that we have 2 different ways we're doing that. We realize we need to work more with technology and volunteers, and so we're starting to realize we need to partner with other organizations like Food Connect and others that are out there, so that we can work with them and utilize their strengths and utilize ours at the same time. We're also figuring out ways, how do we pass on that knowledge to our agencies? So teaching them through a program through Feeding America and Starbucks of, we can take all this funding and we can give trucks and logistics knowledge to our agencies and have them go out and pick up what would have been 20 pounds from one Starbucks store, now turns into 440,000 pounds every year if they can get 30 stores. And then sometimes we just need to do crazy ideas. And this is one where we've started doing, we partnered with the other Pennsylvania area food banks and pooled our funding. We purchased 12 tanker loads of excess milk, and we turned it into 66,000 pounds of cheese that we could then give out to our clients. That is huge, and that is a big scalable thing that we can continue doing. So Philabundance took it one step further, and we figured out, okay, we want to keep doing this. How do we get a sustainable funding source? We now have Abundantly Good which is our cheese brand. We love our puns. So it's abundantly good. And now every time you go to a retailer, you can purchase this cheese, and $1 from every pound goes back for the processing of excess milk into the same quality cheese for our clients. That is really important because really it's a guerrilla subliminal marketing campaign in the best way possible. It's this idea that we should all have the same quality products. So I just want to end with saying that the opportunities for having nothing wasted. So we worked with these farmers to create this cheese. Well, the farmer came back to us and they said, okay, I make this butter production, but it's really expensive for me and we have all of this excess skim milk. Is there something we can do with this? And we tested and we figured it out, and we now have a spoonable and a drinkable yogurt that's made from that skim milk, and so now he has 100% yield on his product. So because we started thinking about new opportunities, others around us then thought about new opportunities. And so it is this collaborative network. So thank you.
Are these just on the desktop? Great. Well, I'm Megan Cornish. I'm the Vice President of Government and Industry Affairs from FoodMaven. And let me just play the slideshow. So I want to start real quick by telling you a story, which I think will demonstrate what we're doing at FoodMaven. So a couple months ago, my contact at a national retailer who has a distribution center up in Denver called me and said, we have an entire semi of organic butterhead lettuce that we can't use. Do you want it? So my first question was, what's wrong with the lettuce? And he assured me there's nothing wrong with the lettuce, but the heads are slightly too small. Therefore they can't go in the front of the store. So I said, how small are we talking? Is this like micro lettuce? Really, what is wrong with the product? He said, they're really just a ½ inch too small. We can't put it in the front of the store, and we're going to drive it to the dump if you don't want it. So that story ends with, we took the product and we put it up on our online marketplace and sold the product. So let me back up with the slide, which I feel like anyone could have this slide today. Just so we can talk about some numbers. 40% of what we produce gets wasted. I think we've heard that number quite a bit today. 68% of farms are in the economic red zone, meaning they're not viable businesses. 42 million Americans are food insecure. So when I look at these numbers, as I'm sure most people in this room think the same way, I wonder if we're not throwing away so much food, is it possible that farmers could be getting more money for their product and that some of the food insecure people could be getting fed? So here's what we're doing. FoodMaven is capturing 3 categories of food. The first is oversupply. Oversupply is endemic in the system because we have a culture where we expect to have everything all the time. And the only way to statistically do that is to oversupply at every stage of distribution. When I was doing my master's, I spent some time in Mozambique. And when I would go down to the market to shop for groceries, often they would be out of tomatoes and onions. Can you even imagine going to a grocery store and not being able to buy tomatoes or onions? I mean, that's just the result of our cultural expectations. So that's oversupply. The second category is imperfect. Think about the entire semi of slightly too small, organic butterhead lettuce. There's nothing actually wrong with the product, but again, retail is brutal when it comes to spec. It has to be perfect. So this is product that's too large, too small, misshapen, off color. And then the third category is local. This is the one that usually surprises people. What we're discovering is that local product seems to be getting wasted at a greater rate than food coming out of big ag. And the reason is smaller farmers and ranchers often don't have direct access to market. So anything that's not contracted may get left on the farm or at the packing shed. So FoodMaven is capturing this product. This is kind of a mess, but it goes from the top left over to the right. We capture this product, we bring it to our own food storage facility where we put it up on an online marketplace and make a market. Chefs and institutional kitchens can shop for this product. When a sale is made, we deliver the product. So we're doing full logistics on both sides, and then we donate whatever isn't sold. On average, we're donating 25 to 40% of the product, which is quite a bit. We donate for free, and we either deliver or offer a will call opportunity to the partners that we're donating with. When someone purchases product from us, we give them a scorecard that tells them 4 things. It tells them how much money they saved, because we're often selling at 50 to 70% of wholesale. It tells them how many dollars went back into the local economy because they bought from a local producer. We tell them the third is carbon footprint emission. Just by purchasing food that would have otherwise been wasted, you're preventing methane gas from being created. So I'll just leave you with one final thought, because people often ask me where the name came from. So Maven is an old Yiddish word that means wise or savvy. So FoodMaven is the wise use of food. Thank you.
Sorry. Hi. Hi, everybody. My name is Maen Mahfoud. I'm the founder and CEO of Replate. So I'm going to give you a quick brief about our organization first, talk about successes, then I move to challenges, and then in the end, I would like to talk about points of collaboration and our impact and what could take us to the next level. So Replate is a tech nonprofit. We're a 501c3, and what we do is we match and deliver leftover food, surplus food from businesses to communities in need instantly, very similar to Uber and Lyft in terms of technology and data-driven. One thing I'd like to mention is that our model is B2B. The kind of businesses we work with are similar to tech offices, catering companies, events, very instant in a consultancy event, or for example, recurrent catered lunches and snacks to offices. And we deliver it to typically shelters, youth programs, soup kitchens, and senior centers. So it's not necessarily food banks, a bit of a lower scale. The way it works, we actually hire our drivers. So we hire our drivers, we pay them about $20 an hour. We train them. We give them the right tools for a good food rescue. We give them carts, typically tarps, certain catering bags. And our model is we basically charge for our fees. So when we work with a business like Amazon, for example, they will choose a pricing plan, a monthly subscription plan, and that's based on the size and the need. So for example, they can also choose to opt out and not choose a plan. Still, they pay more for a delivery versus a monthly subscription plan. So the model is, you can see it's there's about 60% is revenue generated in our business, and then the 40% is typically funded by external partners, foundations, CarryCycle, one of them right here. And then that sort of model allow us to build sort of a competitive technology and also reliable food recovery fleet. And give us, most importantly, the wiggle room to actually go the extra mile for a smaller nonprofit, pay extra money to make sure everyone is getting fed, and at the same time be more flexible with our donors if they need to meet at a sort of a middle ground in terms of our pricing. Yeah, we've been really blessed. We started about January 2016 in San Francisco Bay Area. Started with about 20 deliveries per month. Right now, within 2 years, we do about more than 1,000 deliveries per month. Our main established market right now are San Francisco Bay Area, LA, San Diego, New York, Manhattan, Chicago, and Austin, Texas. These are established markets. For all other emerging markets, we typically outsource our delivery for a cut of that price. You expect the delivery typically if it's on demand within an hour, and if it's recurrent weekly pickup or scheduled pickup, it always happen on time. It's that ease of the ease of technology and makes it super easy for businesses to sign up without even connecting with us. They can sign up for an account, they create their own location, and then they can request their pickups without even interaction with us. Or they can maybe chat with us on the website. Certain challenges we have being sort of a different in terms of our corporate structure when we seek funding is a bit difficult because typical foundations or grant makers, they have a certain way of budgeting your grant. Because we're very much sort of tech company, we don't have that much cost in terms of refrigeration or storage or vehicles. Typically our cost is to hire our food rescuers and train them, and also, of course, hiring engineers and data scientists, and typically they're very expensive to hire. So when you come to propose the plan for a foundation, they typically have like certain percentage, 60% that only goes to hiring, and the rest goes into a program. So I think more flexible funding programs would be very, very useful for us. Opportunities. Opportunities for, I don't know why the picture is, but it's all right. So there's opportunities to collaborate here, and I'm super excited. The main reason we're here is because we're able to sort of figure out these gaps. We're all doing amazing work here, and instead of just doing redundant work and doing work that others are doing, how can we find these gaps and how can we complement each other is becoming very crucial. So the fact that Replate put this together and the fact that Kait Recycle also funding similar recovery organizations in California will help us sort of spot that gap and complement each other to really quadruple or even further improve our impact. Lastly, I want to talk about our impact. These numbers need to be updated, but we're hitting our 2 million pounds of food since about 2 years now. In the process, we're doing all these awesome stuff and also creating meaningful jobs for our food rescuers. I think we're giving a really good shot and good opportunity for our food rescuers to give back to the community and also get paid and move on, specifically from low-income communities. Lastly, I want to talk about the need for funding. We're at a growth stage, so we need more people, more talent on the team, and more senior technical advisor in the food waste industry or even the food industry specifically to help sort of take us to the next level. Thank you for listening.
Let me just make sure that that's playing.
We have a fleet at, we're in San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay. Oh, I broke it. No, I didn't. Okay, great. So my name is Lauren Palumbo. I am the Chief Operating Officer at Lovin Spoonfuls Food Rescue. We are a nonprofit organization that is based here in Boston, but we do serve the communities of both Greater Boston and Metro West, which comprises about 40 cities and towns here in eastern Massachusetts. The reason that I think I'm here today is that we actually sort of approach food rescue a little bit differently than some of the more volunteer-run and other organizations that are here today, all of whom are doing fantastic work. But I wanted to sort of call out some of the differences about our model specifically and why we approach things this way. A few years ago, we really set out to ensure that we were putting systems in place to make our model scalable and also replicable. So we started in 2010 with 1 truck on the road here in Boston, and we now have 5 trucks that are running geographically focused routes here in the Greater Boston area, working predominantly with grocery stores, but during our shortened growing season here in the Northeast, we also work with farms and farmers markets, as well as some other food businesses and institutions. We deliver that food to about 150 nonprofit agencies, again, throughout eastern Massachusetts, and they range in size and scope. We're working with food pantries, after-school programs, senior centers, sober houses, transitional shelters, women's shelters, and so on. Collectively, we're rescuing about 65,000 pounds of food each week, and next month we will rescue our 10 millionth pound of food since our founding in 2010. So a little bit about our operations specifically. We operate
There we go. As I said, we don't actually utilize volunteers in our day-to-day operations. We only operate utilizing trained and certified paid employees in our operations. And we do this to ensure that we're able to provide consistency, efficiency, and safety to the businesses that we're rescuing from. And like I said, we sort of try to make sure that we're providing a consistent solution for them so that we can continue to scale this across all of their stores in a region. Partners here like Whole Foods can speak to that, but certainly we're able to get in consistently at the exact same time each and every day that we're scheduled to be there. As you can see here, we're also doing so utilizing only refrigerated vehicles. As I mentioned, we have a fleet of refrigerated trucks, 5 here in Greater Boston and then 1 in Metro West that I'll speak about in a moment. And we also like to make sure that we're utilizing a system called direct distribution, or what we call it at least. We aren't a food bank. We don't have a storage facility. We don't bring it back somewhere, sort it out, and then send it back out. Our team of food rescue coordinators actually manages the inventory day in, day out from the individual trucks, and we build our geographically focused routes to match the anticipated product from the vendors that we're picking up from with the agencies and their anticipated needs. So our team members understand the differences between an after-school program in Malden, a soup kitchen in downtown Boston, and a food pantry in Melrose, and what that looks like and who needs what, and they really work to make sure that they're prioritizing inventory to those folks' needs. We also utilize a mobile inventory system and a dynamic routing system to ensure that we're doing things as efficiently as possible and tracking everything as effectively as possible. We are not a technology company, we are a distribution company, so I will be clear in saying that we did not develop any of this technology ourselves. We utilize things that are on the existing market, so we are a little bit different in that way as well. But really what this is all targeted at is making sure that every single pound that we move is done as efficiently as possible, that we're utilizing every single dollar that we can as efficiently as possible so that we can hit more folks in need. And lastly, we also work to provide nutrition and education programming to the agencies that we're serving. We're all here to prevent food from going to waste, so it makes absolutely no sense for us to move it from one place to another where they don't know how to use it, where they're not sure what it is, or they're just not sure how to store it or how to cook it. So we provide workshops as well as recipe cards and other materials for the end users of that food to be able to understand what it is, what the nutrition value is, how to store it, quick and easy recipes that are low budget and relatable to various cultures, and then we actually have them translated into a variety of languages as well. Similarly, we also provide training to our vendor partners as well, again, trying to make sure that we're accessing as much food as possible out of their stores and working with their teams to provide training videos and materials so that they're aware of who we are and where the food is going. And I'll wrap up by saying, one of our biggest successes has been, as I said, we're really focused on moving this to a scalable and replicable model, and we were really fortunate with the support of some of the funders that are here today, including the Foundation for Metro West and the Sudbury Foundation, as well as the Health Foundation of Metro West and the Middlesex Bank Foundation, to expand our operations from Greater Boston into Metro West 2 years ago. And we knew that the model could work, or we felt like it could, because we knew that as long as food was going to waste and folks were in need, we could make it happen. And so we've been able to do that in Metro West. It's been incredibly successful. We've rescued over 850,000 pounds of food in that region. And our biggest challenge right now is actually trying to replicate again into Springfield and Worcester, 2 communities that have significant need and that are interested in seeing the work be done there. I will wrap up because I'm told I'm out of time. So thank you all for being here and for listening today.
Oops, one thing.
Nothing like a Mac guy working with an IBM. That. For the next part of our education series. How do you get it to the slideshow?
There we go.
I thought that's what that symbol was.
Yeah. Let's see. Just a double click. There you go. Should pop up. Okay.
Here we go.
Super sensitive. Do a single click. Now let's do this.
Any time left?
Single click.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to Harvard and to Refed and others to be able to come and talk a little bit about Daily Table. It's quite humbling with a great group of people like this. I've heard some amazing things already this morning. I'm looking forward to the question and answers you guys have. So Daily Table formed after I spent a long career at Trader Joe's in the food industry. And when I graduated from there 10 years ago, I had the opportunity to do a fellowship for 2 years at Harvard, and out of which Daily Table was hatched because it really came around at that time an understanding. And one of the big challenges we faced was that there were 49 million food insecure in 2009. I'm happy to hear that's dropped. And much of the problem was that we had both on one hand all of this food that we know that is going to waste, but we also had the fact that of these 49 million food insecure, a number of them didn't either have access in their neighborhoods and or due to issues of being embarrassed, ashamed, et cetera, weren't using the traditional outlets. So Daily Table was designed around trying to use one problem, which is all this food that's going to waste, to help solve another problem, which is affordable nutrition. So, clearly there's wasted food of different types, right? So we use both food that is through organizations, some amazing organizations like Boston Area Gleaners, through going down to the produce market, through other farmers we deal directly with, through working with Food for Free here in the area, Greater Boston Food Bank, et cetera. We get food that is still healthy and wholesome. It sometimes is short in code. We don't sell anything past its code date. But we all know code dates are problematic as far as food safety and as far as health goes, that the code is not really an expiration date. But we have chosen, for reasons of, frankly, out of focus groups, our customers telling us for dignity reasons and concern, to not use product past a code date. But we will work with a lot of companies, whether it's Hain Celestial and Chobani and many others, to take their shorter code product. In some instances, that shorter code product will be 4 or 5 months because it's shelf stable. You can't ship to a grocer with less than 6 months on a product many times. That's what both Hain and UNFI and others have. So we'll get that product, we'll bring it in, and the concept about Daily Table was to set up something that would be a retail outlet. And retail at the time we did this, we started looking at this several years ago, and retail is something that, to me, provides a flip on the typical dynamic, which is most nonprofits, when they're interacting with people in need, are in a position where they have the power and the person has to qualify for their services. And this creates, to many people, and we found certainly through our community work and through the focus group we've done, this creates a feeling of sometimes not feeling great by having to need that service. And by being a retailer, we've got to earn their patronage. We've got to make sure that every day they choose to come shop with us, they get something they think was of value, they have it be healthy, fresh, delicious, at the right price, et cetera. As a nonprofit, we also create jobs. We have 61 employees currently in our 2 stores. They're here in Boston. And we generate about 70% of coverage of our expenses by our own revenue. One of our challenges, of course, is always, as most nonprofits, is revenue. So we're looking for funding for a 3rd store, which we think will get us to about 85, 90% of coverage. We're currently about 10 cents a serving. We have 23,000 members right now. IRS required us to be a membership store. It's free. All we ask for is your zip code so we can track to make sure we're really giving service to a charitable need and in communities that need them, Section 330, et cetera. We also have recovered over 3 million pounds of product that we're told otherwise would have gone to waste, of which I'd say of that probably 80% might have gone to waste. The other 20% would have found other sources. Last statistic here I think is really important in my mind, and that is that from the time we first started, that our community has given us anecdotal stories about the tremendous impact we've had on their life, either in kids that are no longer pre-diabetic or in weight loss or the consumption of fruits and vegetables. But because we're membership and we can track each individual, we know that their average consumption of fruits and vegetables has doubled from what they're purchasing purchasing from us, and that the average basket size of what we are selling has gone up 102% since we first opened. We've become a larger part of their diet. So for this case, food recovery for us is an integral part. It's about 25% of what we sell. The other 75% we purchase. And we are, in our minds, part of a solution, as are all others here on the panel, Feeding America, et cetera. All the food banks, we're members of the Greater Boston Food Bank. We're also registered suppliers. So I think that together, in a systemic problem that we're facing, there's no single vector, no single solution, but that together, I think that we're making a real impact. Thank you.
So thank you all for sharing these, I think, remarkable kind of reflections and stories on these very different organizational models. A couple of themes jumped out at me, and I'm sure many of you caught others, but one was just across the board, these leaders talking about continuous growth, growth in demand, growth in partners, able and willing, certainly growth in just infinite the opportunity they see to do more and serve more, but also the kind of the theme of continuous learning and iteration of the organizations and the models to better serve and to harvest those insights they're gleaning, no pun intended. I guess that's kind of the theme of the week, isn't it? That to kind of iterate that model to bring about more good. Would love to invite the room, and maybe there's a few brave souls, to kick us off with the first couple of questions or observations for this panel. With that, I'll grab a mic.
Thanks to each of the panelists. Amazing work, and congratulations on your success. Beyond pounds of food and people served, what metrics are you capturing now as each of your businesses and organizations grow and develop and mature that is really speaking to the impact in people's lives? And Doug provided some of those. What other measures of impact are you recording now or want to record?
Can I start with that one? So, as I mentioned before, we're just using the basic conversion to figure out what amount of methane gas you can prevent from being created because the food is not rotting in a landfill. And we would love to see institutions look at that on their sourcing side when they're developing their standards globally. So big institutions are measuring what they're throwing away and how they can reduce that, but what about on the buying side, if they're buying food that would otherwise go to waste? Thanks.
I'd just quickly add also that we're in a pilot program with Blue Cross Blue Shield with a couple other organizations, Common Square Health Center, et cetera, called Healthy RX, where they have a longitudinal study where people that are at health distress levels, either they are pre-diabetic or they're suffering from other health issues, the doctors at Codman will identify them. If they're willing to join a program, they'll get a mentor, a coach. They then have an opportunity to come and are actually given coupons, shop at Daily Table for fruits and vegetables and things they can afford. They work with HealthWorks, which is a nonprofit gym. They also, YMCA, et cetera. So this is being something that from a study standpoint is going to track what are the measurable health impacts, in BMI and blood pressure and, et cetera. We also measure and track. We have a teaching kitchen. It's free of charge. We hold classes for both kids after school and also adults 3 to 4 times a week. We hire outside nutritionists and dietitians to run this for us. And we track both, how that is, their use, and then we track what kind of recovery rate from teaching nutrition to then having them become regular members. So that's important to us. Are they, when they hear about nutrition stuff, are they then taking advantage of the opportunity to integrate that into their life? And we're seeing really good results.
So I would also just echo what Doug is saying too. Actually, we have very similar programming. So one of the programs we have is a culinary job training program, and it does 14 weeks of education for people to get them out of the line. So not only are we using food as a tool, but we're then also training and continuing jobs, and then also staying with them and staying connected for the next 2 years to make sure they stay at those jobs. We also are switching over our quality of food. So a pound is a pound is a pound, but not really. And so what we're doing now is we have about 50% of the product that's going out is produce and fresh and healthy items, and starting to switch and have more nutrition guidelines. So less of the tasty cakes, less of the bakery goods that we've all seen, and how do we start to change that? And then the third part we're also doing is we're starting to look at what we're calling gateway organizations. We can't do it all, but can we partner with organizations that have all those services that Doug's mentioning? And if we provide pounds of food to them, we know that that pound actually goes a little bit further because now they're able to do additional programming. So we're kind of harvesting all those options.
Just to add to that, we work with a lot of catering companies. Most of them are catering companies, and they use certain equations to basically, when you move Spanish chicken or Thai food or whatever the gourmet food that you're actually recovering, when you input the data, it can actually tells you what is the percentage of protein versus starch versus all these nutrition. So you can actually take all this data that you're creating from each pickup or each delivery, and that will give you the percentage in terms of the nutritional values of that as well. So you can partner with certain catering companies to provide you with these technologies.
And I just want to thank you for asking that question too. I think it's a very difficult question to answer. We talk about meals, we talk about nutrition, but how are we actually changing lives? We try and use that term. We're trying to help stabilize people's lives. We're currently going through a process right now where we're trying to get some metrics around that, whether it's health and whatnot, but it's a difficult thing to do. So I just appreciate you bringing that to the table. I don't think any of us have that figured out, and I think it should be a continued conversation.
And I'll just add, I heard at least 2 of the panelists mention some work to track the GHG avoidance or reduction impact. Any others on the panel currently doing that or thinking about doing that? Climate?
That right
Yeah.
now. We also measure water saved from the food system as
Sure.
well. And greenhouse gas emission water, and then we do the from a food insecurity perspective, we do the meals created
Absolutely.
as well. Yeah.
And just, a side note for those of you in the room who are always seeking funders or need funders, when you're tracking different, some of those other measures like water use that was avoided, et cetera, climate greenhouse reduction, there's different funders that will strike a chord with than those that are perhaps, traditionally you might be calling on tied to food and hunger or hunger and food insecurity. So just kind of keep that in mind as a potential pathway to new funders. Great. There was another question, I think, in the middle of the room. Caroline, maybe was it the table in front of you? Let's see, maybe over here in the blue shirt.
Hi, this is for Lovin Spoonful. So it sounds like you're not a food bank, but you're moving food. If I was a funder, why wouldn't I ask you to be working with the Greater Boston Food Bank?
Thank you for that. You just led into one thing that I didn't quite have time to get to. We actually do work closely with the Greater Boston Food Bank. We have a unique relationship with them. They are our Feeding America food bank here in Eastern Massachusetts, and they serve both Greater Boston and the Metro West communities that we serve. We have an MOU with them that's really focused around data sharing as well as partnership and collaboration. So part of the piece around data sharing is really understanding that when you are looking at how do you serve a community and how many meals are needed, if they're only able to look at the pounds they are distributing, they're not seeing the whole picture when there are folks like us and Food for Free and other organizations doing work to distribute food in those same communities. And so part of it is data sharing. We also get information from them around the agencies they're serving. But to Liz's point earlier about the retail rescue program, where we are able to work with GBFB is that some of their agencies are only able to pick up from retailers maybe 2 or 3 days a week. And so we actually slide in and make sure that those vendors are served 5 days a week. We only operate Monday through Friday, which is why I said 5. But the important piece there is that we know when grocery stores don't have rescue happening all days of the week, that it becomes less of a habit. And so that's always what we strive for. And whether it is us picking up all 5 days or us and Food for Free splitting days or us and GBFB agencies splitting days, the most important thing is that that food is being rescued and that we're working together as a community to ensure that as much food as possible is not ending up in a landfill.
My name's Tom O'Donnell. I've got a question I want to kind of feed off of what Glenn just asked. I'm not sure how to ask this, but what I'm struggling with a little bit with Feeding America all the way down to Replate and Lovin Spoonful and Doug, is there going to be a developing sense of tension and competition in the food rescue space?
I think for a number of years, we've been around for 8 years. Obviously, the food bank here in Boston has been around much longer. I think we existed in a field of perceived tension, and we sort of got the question all the time of, are you competing with the food bank? And the food bank, I think, was probably also fielding questions like, what is this Lovin Spoonfuls? Like, what is food rescue? What does that mean? And finally, a few years ago, we just sat down and honestly, we just had lunch, and I sat down with the COO at the Greater Boston Food Bank, and we had a really fantastic conversation. We were able to understand how we do things that their model doesn't do. All of their trucks are way larger than what we operate. We move 12-foot box trucks down alleys and Boston streets, which an 18-wheeler I wouldn't recommend. So we're able to get into stores and rescue 500, 600, 700 pounds of food where they're able to move pallets. We don't move pallets. It's not on our agenda, and we're not a food bank. So I think understanding where people can complement each other and understanding each other's strengths was really important, and we've been able to build an incredibly strong relationship, and we hope to see more of that. I will say I think there is still perceived tension, but we encourage folks wherever possible to sit down and have that conversation, and our partners at the food bank and we as well have been willing to share the content of that MOU confidentially with folks in the field if they're interested in building that partnership with their food bank.
So I'm going to be a little controversial here, and I will say not just perceived tension, there is tension. There are a lot of challenges, and it doesn't always work, and we are all sometimes fighting for the same donors, whether it be food or funders or whatever it may be, but I do think there are really strong examples of how to make it work. And I think us, again, as the big food bank in the area in Philadelphia, we're learning from those other examples that are out there. I've seen it go really well, and I have heard great things about how well it works here in Boston, and I've also seen how it can go really terribly in other cities. I want to make sure we don't repeat that in Philadelphia, and that's why it is so important. And it's not exactly exciting or sexy, but spending the time to do the MOUs to try to figure out how do these partnerships look like so we can really develop sustainable partnerships.
Kate, I'd love to just back up and say, first of all, it's great to see Glenn. Glenn and I, for several years, have off and on had a monthly phone call for a while as part of an example of learning and sharing together. Also, I will say that one of our early supporters, surprisingly, was Catherine D'Amato of the Greater Boston Food Bank, and she was one that came down, saw our space before it even opened, decided and pushed through on with her board that she was going to support Daily Table, which could be looked at as a competitive or a challenging paradigm in hunger relief, as you know, because there's many things we do that would challenge a typical food bank model, but what the recognition was, and she and I came to an early understanding that I didn't turn off my Apple phone, I turned off my other phone, I forgot about that, that what's critical is that none of us can solve the problem alone. And as any food bank will tell you, they can't look you in the eye and say we can provide 100% of the needs for our constituents. No one can do that. We need, you know, whether it's various types of FoodMavens, daily tables, fresh trucks, you know, I would say fair and squares, whatever they were that have been opportunities that, yes, there's an X amount of food to be recovered, it's finite, but I think the need drives collaborative work together and realizing you can reach people that sometimes other people can't, or reach them in a way that they couldn't, and that together we're actually stronger. So I think that although there's those natural tensions, and I really appreciate Kate being honest and talking about the realities, that I think that the more we work together, the sooner this problem will be resolved.
I'd like to add an, sorry.
Well, just as Feeding America, I think the pendulum has really swung in a positive way. Of course, there's some tensions, but I think the tensions are bringing people to the table for conversations, just to your point. And I also think, you know, if we're all trying to lead in this space, the numbers are staggering. There's a lot of food that's wasted. There's a lot of people who are hungry. And if we're really leading in this space, it should be enabling people to do this work more efficiently and ensure food safety with it. And so I think there's some positive things coming out of this. And I think, you know, events like this are great where we get to sit down and have conversations. So
I just want to add one
Yeah.
thing super quickly, an
Oh,
example.
go ahead,
of
Maen, and then we'll take
success.
one more question after Maen's
So
response.
we, just at the level of our food recovery app, we work.
A little closer to the mic.
Yeah, at the level of our food recovery app. So we had a partnership with Rescuing Leftover Cuisine in New York while we are in Oakland, California. So whenever they get an on-demand pickup, instead of, for example, turning away the clients, they would refer the client to us, and then they get a referral fee. So the idea here is how can you make it win-win for both parties without turning down a client just because being competitive, right? So
Absolutely.
how can we direct the right client or the right donor to the right organization? We can all do that to each other instead
Yeah.
of just turning the food down and not helping anyone.
Absolutely, yeah, the power of referrals. And before we segue to a final question, just a final reminder, if you hadn't had a chance to do so, if you've got that question, comment, or idea for one of the panelists, you might include your email address on that Post-it note that goes on the wall, so they'll be able to follow up with you if that's something you desire. And Caroline, did you have another question? Back of the room.
Hello, I'm here from Canada, so forgive me if I don't know what's obvious. We talked about sharing data. Is there a seamless way that from donor or processor or retailer that data can be shared amongst all the organizations, all the way to the consumer? Does such a thing exist? Or is anyone working on it?
Across all surplus food that is generated?
Correct. Well, in the exchange that happens with any of the organizations, does the processor or retailer share their data with you, and do you then share it all the way down the line? Is there some kind of seamless method to do that?
I can possibly talk a little bit about this. So we work with big companies, and sometimes we will measure the data for them, because when they decide to sign up for our services, we will pick up the food, and of course our drivers will note down on the app how many pounds they recovered and describe these numbers and describe the donation. And then by the end of the month, or even at that day, they can look at their dashboard and see these metrics in terms of how many times they donated, how many pounds they recovered, how much CO2 they diverted from the environment. All this shows live on their dashboard. But the question is, some of these organizations are cool with these numbers, and they would like to share it with all their company and to engage their employees and show how awesome their PR and CSR is. But other companies will look at these numbers and say, why are we wasting all this food? And then, so the question is, it really depends on what leadership do you have in place in terms of how to share these numbers and how do you want to use them. I think really is different between each company that we work with. But these numbers are there. It's really about how to use them, and are these businesses open to sharing them and they're okay with them.
Yeah, and as usual with this summit, we have more questions than time, so please feel free to approach the speakers over the course of these 2 days. But first of all, just a huge warm thank you to these panelists for sharing out. And before we segue for lunch, again, Post-it notes on the posters for each organization, and then Caroline or Annika, anybody let me know if there's any housekeeping other than announcing lunch? Anything else? Okay, no, enjoy lunch, everybody. Thank you.